It is January 20th, 2015. My name is Alexander Stevens, and we are in Athens, Georgia. Could you introduce yourself, please?
My name is Lemuel LaRoche, also known in the Athens community as Life, the Griot, or just Life.
All right, thanks for taking time to talk with me today.
Thank you for inviting me out.
To start with, could you tell me a little bit about where you grew up?
Okay, I was born and raised in Brooklyn, New York. I was born August 4th, 1976, actually a home birth. And so New York it shaped my ideas of the world, and it was in the 76. So in the 70s, there was that crucial moment, life. But New York, I was a New York baby, my father was he was a poet, and he was an altruist. He was a very warm spirit, Everywhere I went with him, people always loved him, people always respected him. Everywhere we went, everybody knew his name. So I grew up in, I would say, a community type environment where they believed in the principles of it takes a village to raise a child. So it was a community setting where the community worked together, and it was more of an Islamic background, but that was my upbringing when growing up, and I got a chance to learn to speak Arabic, a little bit of Hebrew, and I had teachers from Sudan, Morocco, so it was a community setting where, they realized that it was a need to develop the next generation in a way where we can, we see a lot of the stuff that's going on in the world today, but where we can learn to respect each other and love each other, and we really practice that as a community. So that was the foundation for a lot of my upbringing. And, regular guy, went to school, I didn't get into much trouble, but I got into my trouble, my fair share. Always kind, always, just a people's person. That's what my parents used to always say. You was very kind as a kid. You always wanted to share and help. And I remember my mom gave me a letter I wrote, I think when I was 8 years old, and I was talking about, I want to be a farmer. When I grow up, I want to be a farmer. Here I am in New York, buildings, no trees, but I'm talking about I want to be a farmer. And so she was just like, I was always that type of kid that it was just about helping, and I think I took a lot of that from my father, because he was always about helping and bringing the peace and trying to avoid conflict in any ways. And so I can go on, but that's a little bit about me.
What was your father's name?
His name was William Taylor.
And he was a poet in the 60s?
Yeah, he was a poet. I don't think his work ever got out. My mom, I remember reading his work when my mom finally said, look, I want you to read some of your father's work. Because I was kind of, I'm a student of the 80s when hip hop came in. So I was always, trying to, do a little rap here and there. And my mom used to be like, look, I want you to see some of your father's work. I want you to see that, your father was a poet. He wrote a lot about life. He wrote a lot about the world. And she would let me read some of the poems that he wrote to her, and I was like, wow, my pop was a serious poet. So that, I think when I learned he was a poet, it put me into the mind frame that I can get a little deeper. I can reach a little deeper within myself than just kind of scratch the surface on the things you see and the things you want to talk about, but start to write from within. And learning about my father's work, that's what kind of drew me inward as a poet. And it made me just kind of, he showed me, in a lot of my poems, I make a lot of reference to my father and how he would walk me through certain communities and say, look around. You have problems and you have solutions. Look around. Look at all this stuff. How do you think it got here? It didn't just happen. It's policies, it was structure, things, it got here. And he would always say, you will have a role to play, whether you're going to be part of the problem or you're going to be part of the solution. We see the direction the world is going. You can play a part to bring the world towards its destruction or heal the world in some kind of way. And so he was always about planting those seeds. And as a kid, you don't get it. You see it, you hear it, you be like, it makes sense. I just want some pizza. You know what I'm saying? So you don't really understand it. But what I saw that as I became a younger man, as I grew into a younger man, a lot of things that my father would talk about, you began to see it differently. It's like a farmer planting a seed, not planting the seed so he can eat tomorrow, but planting a seed so that somewhere down the line, experience is going to water it, and you're going to begin to really see life for what it is. And I'm really grateful to my father for that, you know. So he helped to really shape the foundation. He was a phenomenal poet, and I really wish I would have got a chance, or the world would have got a chance to at least hear some of his poetry or read some of his poetry. And before he passed in 2012, but before he passed, I was able to get a story from him. And I released it in my latest book, was it Hidden Ripples, Life's Unspoken Language. And I was able to get a story from my father where he was big on just imagery. He was big on writing from the perspective of a leaf, writing from the perspective of a tree, writing from the perspective of an anthill, you know, like the things you don't think about. My father was really big on that. And my mom is more the comical. She's just that dry humor, very funny, like finding jokes and everything. And that's from my mom's side of the family. It's a very comical, loving, open, real, but my father was always that deep inflection, that deep thinker, that philosopher, that, you know, that was my father. So I always like to say, I tell people, like, as a man and a woman come together and conceive a child, you can have one writing style and another writing style that can merge and conceive a different writing style. There's so many words. So, yeah. I could go on, but you know.
Yeah, it sounds like even though you say that the points your dad was trying to make didn't necessarily stick right then, they were sort of seeds that were planted, but you started writing pretty young, right?
Yes, I started writing, and of course, I would say when you write, especially growing up in New York in the 80s, in the early 90s, I'm a 70s. I was born in the 70s, but we grew up in the 80s in New York, and it was a different world where you would step outside and it was like, you know, it was a commercial. Do you know where your children are? You know what I'm saying? Like, so New York was a different world, excuse me, than what it is now. So when I wrote, I would always write based on, you know, just what the common influence is, you know, through the hip hop. And you would see the style and the format and the rhythm and the swag, and you were just trying to write, you know, like, hey man, I grew up with you just come up with, and what it would be for fun. So when I really began to be serious about my writing, and I think the first piece I wrote was a piece called Warriors Without a War. And it was kind of a reflection of what you really see in the neighborhoods, how so many young kids were programmed, even though we all look the same, it's like we were programmed to attack each other, to hurt each other. And it's like trying to get an idea of what is this program? What is this program that got me looking at the guy that looked like me and want to attack him? You know what I mean? And when I began to share, like that was probably my first real poem that I wrote. And, you know, I read it now, I'm like, oh man, it's elementary. But back then it was just like, wow, like, you know, I was able to see that at 13 or 14 and sharing it with my brother. At the time, he was incarcerated, and he was just like, you need to get your word out. You need to let other people, I'm letting people inside read your work and they're inspired. So he's like, you need to let other people read what you got to say, man. Like, so I would say my brother kind of helped to give me that voice, because he, in his own right, he was a writer. And all my brothers, you know, in their own right, they were writers, and you know, they can be rappers and poets, because the apple don't fall far from the tree, and that was my father. So I started writing early, but like anything, you know, you write, it's like, oh man, the world, you know, it's corny, ain't nobody gonna feel it, ain't nobody gonna understand it, it's a mute point until you share it, and then you see that it inspires people, and it's like, wow. And that's where it got me into just writing a lot more, and you know, just began to write, and it was, poets used to always tell me, if you want to become a better poet, read other poets, read other work. And as I began to read, my father was big on Khalil Gibran. Khalil Gibran was a poet. I would say he helped to shape my ideas for how I understand poetry. Growing up, you know, you learn about Shakespeare and, you know, Othello, and you know what I mean, and a lot of the books that they put before you in middle schools and high schools, or junior high schools and high schools growing up in New York. But my father was big on introducing me to the work of Khalil Gibran, and his work was always about seeing life from a different perspective, or understanding like our children are not our children. They're the sons and daughters of life, longing for itself. They come through you, but not from you, you know? So my father used to always quote this stuff like, man, and I used to be like, wow, Pops is deep. And then he used to introduce me and my sisters and my brothers to Khalil Gibran and other writers. And that's when I began to say, okay, let me get a little more focused with this writing, you know?
So you were reading and hearing Gibran from your father.
Yes, yes.
What about other poets or hip hop that you were listening to in the 80s?
Where do you begin? Another poet that I would say really had a great influence on me was a poet by the name of Saul Williams. And I remember watching the movie Slam. He made a movie called Slam, and I remember watching it, and I was like, wow. Because, you know, a lot of times I was writing just kind of on the surface. But Saul Williams had the ability to just go in. Then, you know, then you got Nikki Giovanni, The Last Poets, you know, Langston Hughes, you know, just the regular poets that you learn about and growing up. You know, you learn a lot during African, you know, in New York, you can learn, it's a lot more African, you know, Black History Month. You learn a lot more than just, you know, the basic, you know, like the same 10 people that they always tell you about, you know. But we would really get into just different poets and different unsung heroes and different people, and that gave me an opportunity to just kind of read and just say, wow, let me, you know, I like the way this poet project this image, or I like the way, and I just began to just try to just begin to blend with style, but still having my own, with my father being my foundation, my spirit being my foundation, you know, and writing from within. Because I can start writing, like now I probably got about 20 poems going on in my head where life writes. I'm just, you know what I'm saying, like it comes through you, not from you, as Khalil Gibran would say. And I try to tell a lot of poets, it comes through us, not from us. So as I drive daily, as I see through the news and some of the injustice and a lot of things that you see going on in the world, you write. And I constantly write in my head, and I'm constantly writing. And then the piece, I read a piece the other day. I forget the poet that quoted. He says, sometimes the poet don't know what the poem is about. You know what I mean? Where the poem writes itself in so many ways, and that's what happened. I write in my head, and then the poem kind of says, okay, if I don't stop this, then this thing can end up being a half an hour long. So let me just stop it, because the attention span of people are, you know, kind of short. So try to just pack it with a little bit at a time, as much as I can, and then just release it. So hip hop played a big role in shaping my ideas of the world as well. You know what I mean? And I'm not talking about a lot of stuff that you see now, because the stuff we see now is not controlled. It's controlled by a different entity. It's put out there to shape and program the world of what the African American community is and looks like. And that's not always true. And it's far from it. But when the world is programmed to see us as violence, as criminals, because of, okay, look at this video, look at this hip hop video. And I saw that a lot when I got a chance to travel and go to South Africa and go to Israel and go to different places, and people would be like, hey man, hey, you got 40, you got blunts. And it's like, come on man, like you serious? But that's the power of the media, and it has the ability to influence and shape. Before you even get a chance to meet a person, you've already formed a premature conclusion of who this person is without even communicating, without even making eye contact, without even shaking a person's hand, without even understanding a person's point of view. You come to a premature conclusion. And so the hip hop that I was raised on was not the hip hop that we see now. There was a lot of KRS-One, a lot of Brand Nubians, a lot of Poor Righteous Teachers, J. Rue the Damager. These were poets, Public Enemy. These were poets not poets, but hip hop artists that used the music to put forth a message of, yo, we heading for self-destruction, uplift, work together, community. And it's like, how could the mass not embrace that message in hip hop? Why is the corporations behind, who give give all the labels behind it, why are they continue to spew out the same violence, degrading, the same energy? And at some point, you have to realize that it's deliberately done, and you try to share that in your poems, and you try to share that in your action, and and try to do your best to just kind of fight against this Goliath, because there's billions of dollars that is being put into shaping and constructing and programming and conditioning the minds of these kids, and then you have systems that catch. Once the kids act out that behavior that is being programmed inside of them, then you have systems that catch them, and the cycle just keeps going. And at some point, we're like, as poets, as men, and especially as African American, as black men in this country at this time, in this moment, where it becomes our duty to not just sit down and watch generations and generations just being filtered or being cycled into the prison complex. And it's like, at some point, where's the morality? Where's the humanity behind that? And yeah. So my upbringing was the rappers that shaped my ideas of the world. It was always, we got to fight the power, and we headed for self-destruction, and one love, and Bob Marley. He's not hip hop, but he's reggae. But that was my upbringing. My father used to a lot of Stevie Wonder, a lot of Marvin Gaye. What's going on? And that is what I believe shaped my ideas and ideals of the world as a young man, and what thrust me into activism, what thrust me into the role of not being part of the problem, but being part of the solution in society.
I want to talk more about structures at some point in our conversation, but for now, as we talk about your early life,
yeah.
In addition to poetry, your father and I think some of the other elders in your community mentored you in chess.
Yes. Chess. There was a brother named, and me and some of my friends that we grew up, our childhood mates that we grew up with, we talk about this gentleman. His name was, we just call him Abraham, Mr. Abraham. And I believe he was in Air Force. He was probably retired from the Air Force. And he would just plant a lot of good seeds inside of us. And I think what immediately, because a lot of times when you kids, it's like, you don't just take what people say offhands. Like, somebody has to do something that say, wow, like I want to know more, I want to learn more. And I think he stood across the room one day with a rubber band, and he just like plucked the fly off the wall. Like, look, from across the room, whoosh, and he hit the fly. We was like, whoa. And just, it was something small, but something that small is what made us say, wow, like, and he would just talk to us like, every day you learn something every day. So he would, when we was young, he used to always just have us learn chess. And when I learned chess, I always learned chess from not the ego. Because a lot of times we're grandmasters and we can think 20, 50 moves ahead. I can't do that, you know what I'm saying? I can't do all that. But when I learned chess, I've always learned chess from the point of, this is chess. This is life. This is the mirror, chess and life. Think before you do things. You know what I mean? Focus. And so I always learned chess from that aspect. But we would play and we would learn strategies and things, but it was more of how you applying this in real life. And I think that's what shapes my idea for developing a nonprofit, you know what I mean, chess and community. But growing up, there were those elders that would always teach us chess, you know, and I began to incorporate that into when I began working with youth. And I said, let me include chess, because regardless of where you're at, chess was always a way of, you have to sit back and you have to think through a situation. And if you can get you to continue just thinking through scenarios and situations and different points, then you can begin to, it's easier to, when you are confronted with real issues, that you can kind of think your way through the situation. So those elders back in the days, there was those brothers, they would just say, look, let me teach you chess. Let me, you know, and then, you know, New York, you go through the parks, they all playing chess, and you just sit there and watch. But you want to play? Here's $1. Like, I ain't got $1 to throw away, but I'll watch the game all day, and then just go on your way. But it was those elders who understood that we have to develop the next generation of kids to think critically, to think through scenarios and think through circumstances that they will face in life. Not they might, that they will face in life, because it's a real world, and hate is real, and racism is real, and, you know, these things are real. So you can either feed into that, or you can think your way, you know, you can feed into it with your emotions, or you can just kind of think your way through the situation and find a common ground. So I always try to use my poetry, you know, that altruist, that social worker in me, that, and merge it with the strategist, with the chess player, and just kind of form some type of, you know, structure, you know, if I may say, yeah.
I want to talk about that as well in a little bit. You came down south though, right? After living in Brooklyn for your whole life.
Yes.
You came south.
Yes.
How'd you end up in Georgia?
In Georgia, man. Let me see. When I came south, it was a way of, you know, just, you know, it's crazy. It's almost as if, you know, a lot of people are flying to the light. You know, the city's a light, you know, and like a mosquito and a moth, you fly towards the light, you know, and when the light captures you, it could blind you, you know, in so many ways. Growing up, it was like you want to get a chance to see something different. I remember we used to go upstate New York, and you would say, like, man, look at the deers. Like, wow, did you see that deer? And it would be amazing. Look at the cows, because you see that on TV. And here you are growing up in a city where it's a concrete jungle, you know. They're built, stacked on top of each other, you know, and it shapes your ideas of what the world is, you know, and you even begin to think within a box or within a grid, you know what I mean, within a certain mindset. And coming south was a way to say, okay, like, you know, you're going to experience something different, you know. And at the time, I know a lot of, like, friends, a lot of people I know was like, yo, I'm about to just go south, man, get out of New York, because, you know, you hear the story, man. When you see your high school, people you went to high school with, and people just end up getting incarcerated or get killed. And it's like, you gotta go into a new environment, a different environment. So coming south was that. It was like, okay, let me see a different environment. Let me see what else it has to give. So I came down, I started in Atlanta, and it was like, okay, I'm just little New York, you know. But Atlanta back in the like mid to late 90s, it was a different energy there. So it was like I was in Atlanta and I got a chance, and it was like, and I just remember coming south, and it was just like, I remember driving, it felt like you was driving for days. You know, you would sleep, wake back up, sleep, and like, man, when are we getting there? Because it was the first trip out of New York where you have to drive 13, 14, 15 hours. And seeing like animals on the road and seeing deers, dead deers, and looking at like, what is that? Like, look at that big rat. And somebody said, that's a possum. It's like, a possum? Like, it looked like New York City rats, you know? But it was like, that thing is big. It was like, it's a possum, you know? So you would see TV and you would see like tree houses, and you would see kids building tree houses, and like, man, I want to do that, but ain't no trees out here around that, you know? So it was kind of like becoming a kid again, but at the same time, it was also about shaping your identity, because growing up, we used to see Dukes of Hazzard, you know, so we used to have the Confederate flag on top of the cars, but we didn't really understand that growing up. It was kind of like, man, I want that car, I want to draw that flag on it, because it was cool, you know what I mean? But when you come down the South, then you begin to, you know, you stop for a bathroom break, and you go in the bathroom and you read some of the stuff on the walls, you're like, good Lord, like, where am I walking into? What am I walking to? Like, die, you know, I hate, blase, and it's like, wow. So it's kind of like, okay, let me begin to be a little more conscious of, not saying that it's not racism in New York, because trust me, you see what's going on with the police and stuff up there. It definitely exists, but I just think it's hidden better. Whereas down south, straight up, hey, I don't like you. Hey, I'd rather you tell me you don't like me, and I know walk this way, you walk this way, we leave each other alone, versus somebody who don't like you, but he or she has access to a policy that can control your life. So coming down south, it was like, to me, it was a new world. Like, you know, it was like, I loved it. And Atlanta, and then from Atlanta, I went to Macon, Georgia. And that was like stepping like way back, like not gonna say way back, because I learned a lot. I learned so much in the South, so much about who I am, and just different mindsets and different mentalities. And I think that allowed me to I can see what my father saw, in the sense of sometimes you have to look at the world through somebody else's lens, through somebody else's perspective, or you don't just see things through your perspective all the time, because there are various different perspectives on how the world works. And coming south, I learned a lot. I made a lot of mistakes, and I learned a lot. And from there, from Macon, Georgia, I graduated from Southwest High School, but I would leave and go back to New York, and came back. And so my education was kind of like everywhere. That wasn't really where my focus was. But when I eventually did graduate from Southwest High School in Macon, I took a route, because my GPA was shot, you know. So I took a route going towards Gordon College in Barnesville, Georgia, and it was with, I would say, my other brothers, like these, not my biological brothers, but they were brothers that was like, man, we're gonna go to this college, you gonna come with us? And their fathers would say, would encourage us, like, come on, I'm taking my sons to school, you come with us. And again, it takes that village to raise a child that shaped me, that shaped me into the person that I am today. And I went to Gordon College, and then from there, I transferred to UGA, and here I am.
So yeah. you had family, friends in Macon, right?
Yeah, it was like people you knew, and I would just go and stay with this guy, and you know, he enrolled me in school, and so it was different elders and different people that knew my father, you know, that said, look, I got you. I mean, look, let me make sure you go to school, you know, you go this, you go do that, you know, and so I had that.
And did your father have roots in the South?
I would say yes and no. I'm not gonna say he had roots in the South, because my grandmother, okay, let me take that back. From my mother's side, yes, there's roots down in, you know, the Geechees down in Charleston. you know, because that's the Geechee. I'm a Geechee boy. As they say, when I go visit the Geechees. That's from the John Island, James Island, the lower country, as they call it. So that's my mom. My mom had roots, but my father, he's pretty much more of the islands, Dominica, not Dominican Republic, but Dominica. My grandmother's from Dominica, so my grandmother on my mother's side was more native. She was, you know, a Native American, so it was like just kind of some of everything, you know. And so I can grab, you know, in all aspects. But I don't think my father had roots, but there were people that my father knew who were down south that it was like, okay, you know, you can, you know, stay with this family and things like that.
So after a time at Gordon College, you ended up at UGA.
UGA, University of Georgia.
What was your first impression of the university?
To be honest, it's you know, and it does the South an injustice when people only perceives that, okay, you're going south, that means there's nothing but racism down there, because that's the mindset. South, history, racism, you know. But so in coming, it was like, okay, I know I'm going to probably encounter some of the deepest minds, you know what I mean, just in the sense of racism, but at the same time, I can get a chance to really get to know that real Southern peach, you know what I mean, sort of. Because Gordon College was his own little world, you know what I mean, in the sense of the police. Like, I've never had so many encounters with police officers that were just blatantly, like, racist. You know what I'm saying? Like, blatant racist. And it's like, whoa, like, you're a police officer. Like, if you hate, why are you in that position? Like, period. Like, so.
Can you think of a specific
Oh,
time?
man, plenty of cinema. Think of one? Oh, man, do we have enough time to, you know, just keep going? But I can think of scenarios where I'm driving and a police officer is driving adjacent to me, and we just lock eye contact as we going over the railroad track, and before you know it, he turns around, and it's like, serious? You pull me over? And he was like, is there any reason why somebody would call your car having drugs in it? And I'm like, well, that wasn't the only car made that year, so of course not. So, you know, you had to get sarcastic, even though it's not the right way to go, but it's like, it's blatantly why you pull me over. I've got pulled over in the sense where, I mean, where the police officer was literally trying to trigger something in you. And that's what people don't understand. It's like when a police officer says, you know, you look down, like, what are you looking at? Like, it's like, you're a police officer. I'm not telling you to speak. Get your hands out your pocket. Like, to purposely, it's like, you're here to protect and serve, sir. You know, but a lot of times, like, okay, let me, you know, be careful. I still want to get home. I'm not afraid of you at all, but it's not worth it. I don't have bail money, you know, so let me comply. But it's a lot of those type of scenarios where you can see, like, the outlash, the outcry that you've seen is going on in this country today. It's not just fabricated. It's not because we have nothing to do. It's because it's some blatant officers that are out of control. And I don't speak for the entire. There are some officers that are way out of control. And God forbid one is having a bad day and you cross that person. And that's not just a black issue. I've ran into a lot of my white friends, a lot of Hispanic friends who deals with a lot of the same issues. But in Gordon College, I mean, it was just one particular officer who was always just, anything I'll do, he was just, every time he seen me, he was just pulling me over. Where are you going? Like, sir, I'm going to class, you know, like, what are you doing here? Like, well, there's a school here, there's stores here I can eat at, you know what I mean? Like, can you reframe your question, sir? You know, so it was a lot of that, but God forbid I never got killed or thrown in jail for something that I didn't do. And I did experience, like, racism on a lot of different levels, you know, where I walked into a store and a lady, you know, I'm giving a lady money, and I know what I gave her you because I was contemplating, should I break this 20? And I gave her some money, and instead of, you know, giving her some change, she's like, no, you only gave me $1. It's like, ma'am, I gave you people always do it. And it's like, see, no. So let me just get $20 worth of stuff. And the camera work, let's bring the camera out. I'm not going to argue with you. So a lot of stuff like that where it's like people automatically assume, and walking into the store in Macon, Georgia, walking to a store with a couple of friends during lunch, and the clerk just locks the door, and they all were stealing. And it's like, you saw all of us steal? Look at all this money I got in my pocket. How do you see all of us steal? Where's the camera to prove? But the cop has to listen, and you get locked up with everybody. And it's like, so she can just say anything, and I'm incarcerated, but it's your word against mine. So I've had a lot of really, no experience that they have had back in the 60s and the 70s, but just different experience in the way you say, man, you recognize that, okay, this is real. This racism is real. I need to really learn how to carry myself. I don't need to change who I am to make you feel good. Let me be who I am, and let me respect you in the same way you should respect me. And that's why I think the moment that I have to cut my hair. I have to totally conform so that you can feel comfortable. And that's the part. It was like, you're not willing to do that for me. You know what I mean? I'm willing to do, okay, you have access to the jobs. You can give me a job. I get it. And you don't want me make nobody afraid. I get it. But I'm going to respect you, and please respect me in the same manner. And that's what I think about of humanity, where we somehow missed out, where we don't respect each other. There's no respect, There's no, I see you, I already come to a premature conclusion of who you are, be it you're a black person or a white person. You know what I mean? And that's what just keeps, a gentleman said this yesterday, whether it's black supremacy or white supremacy or, it's all the same issue that's going to continue to just pull the country into the direction that's being pulled into. But I don't know how I swayed way off subject, but hey, got a lot to say, bro.
No, don't worry about that. That's totally fine. Given all those experiences, when you came to UGA and Athens, how was what you saw or experienced the same or different, or both?
It's, how can you say it? It's, how can I say? I say it like this. When you get a chance to meet a white person who shares the same spirit, you know what I'm saying? A lot of times you hear about it, like, oh, okay. People say, oh, they all evil, all black people are this, all white people are this. But when you get to meet somebody who shares the same, your spirit, and it was like, yo, like, he gets me. I get you. You know what I mean? And you would run into different issues. I would run into different issues. And, I lived on campus. And, you go into a room and there's a Confederate flag. You're like, oh, boy, how are we going to do this? But I was always like, hey, man, I want to enjoy it. I want to get to know the mindset. Because my thing is, if you dislike me, not saying the Confederate flag is a symbol of hating black people, because it's culture for a lot of people, and I had to learn that, But it was like, let me understand your mindset. Let me understand this mindset that, that I'm going to be friend. We're going to be doing business together in the future. We're going to be pushing policies together, maybe. You're going to be the future senator. You're going to be a policymaker at some point. So let me get to an idea to understand your mindset, and let me get an opportunity to influence you in a way to show you that, no, everybody, because a lot of, and you learn that kids would tell me, like, man, I grew up in a town where we've never had a black person in our town. Like, I would see black people. Like, I was no black people in our schools. So it was like, my only perspective of a black person is what I see on TV. And they're not doing a good job of, spraying our image, So it was an opportunity to really learn. So I would run to kids. They'd be like, hey, man, how you doing, man? You like Nelly? And I'd be like, hey, you like Garth Brooks? And they'd be like, I didn't mean it like that. I didn't mean it like that. So it was like, when you meet me, what's your name? Where you from? You know what I mean? Let's engage in a regular dialogue. Like, I'm a person. Don't immediately associate me with a music preference. I'm not going to ask you what's your music preference before I ask your name. So what's your name? You know what I mean? And I would have kids be like, man, yo, I'm going to be honest with you. My mom's like, my family, like, they racist, you know. But like I've never got a chance to really meet and engage with a person like a black person, and you're totally different from how I thought black people were. So it was like, wow. So how do you think black people were? You know, but it's understood. So I can't forgive you. Like I can't blame you for your ignorance. You know what I'm saying? In the same way, you don't blame me for my ignorance, because my ideas of white people was from what history showed me. You know what I mean? You get the chance to meet and engage, and I met some really good spirits. Like I'll call them my brothers. Like till this day, yo, that's my brother, and they understand. I understand where. And the kid was telling me, yeah, my mom don't really like, you know. And then you see the mom that weekend, you know, and the mom is smiling in your face, hey, how you doing? And you're like, how you doing, ma'am? But it's like, and the kids behind you like, don't say nothing, don't say nothing. So, you know, it got a chance to help me understand that, like, people are people on all levels, on all layers. And you're going to run into those who care, who are open in spirit, who are really good people. And you're going to run into those who have their own issues, so they project that outward because they're dealing with their own issues. So I had to learn to step back and really kind of understand policies, and then sitting in classrooms and sitting in multicultural classes and hearing different perspectives. And now there's a platform for me to share. The same way I understand your mind. I understand why you think the way you think. You know what I'm saying? I understand that. That don't make it right, but I understand it. And we'll be in the classrooms where we can debate different issues, and we'll hear people say, man, well, I just don't like, you know, those people. And it's like, well, you know, like it's understood, you know what I mean? But at least have a reason, you know what I mean? What's the reason, you know? So being in school, it was an opportunity to really get that chance to understand that mindset and engage it in a way where I can, where how can I put it, where you can begin some type of healing. Because at some point, you know, whatever your issues are, at some point you're gonna have to come face to face with it. So it was an opportunity. It helped me, being that I'm do a lot of work with social work and dealing with counseling, working with different families, white, black. I can understand the mindset, because I've had, you know, I've had some people say some really ignorant things, but you have to maintain your composure and understand where they're coming from and find a way to engage them in a positive way, if that makes sense.
Athens and UGA have a reputation in the state for being, perhaps, I don't even know what the best word would be. People sometimes use the word liberal or progressive compared to the rest of the state. You've talked a little bit about your experience on campus. What about UGA and Athens specifically, the communities here? What was your impression of how diversity was talked about, or how race really, the role that race played, and sort of what's going on in people's everyday lives in this space?
Okay, well, I remember when I understand Athens, I try to put myself in the mind frame of how I got to understand Athens as a community. I came here as a student. So as a student, like every other student, your mind was on, okay, the girls, the school work, and, you know, just like UGA was your community. But when being in the social work, you get a chance to go out into the community and learn about the real issues that were going on in the community. And I remember one of my teachers, Dr. McNair, he's no longer with us. He was, you know, he's one of my professors, man. He was a really good guy, you know, and he would give us different projects where we would go into the community and we would have to address the gentrification, and we would, you know, because this is part of, now you're going to practice what it's like to be on the ground. And when I got a chance to really go into the Athens community, I saw that there were like two totally different worlds. You have the UGA world where you you drink, you do your work, you surround yourself with all the students, you hit Ramsey's, you go to the gym, you have a good time, you party, and then you go to, but then there was an entire community outside. And my thing was, okay, let me get a chance to really begin to understand this community more. At the time, I didn't know Athens was one of the poorest counties. I didn't know all of that. But I began to learn as we go out there and say, man, you know, like, you mean tell me, like, you've never been on campus? You've never been on UGA? It's right down the street. Like, man, I don't want to go down there. Why? You got an opportunity to, man, them folks don't want us down there. Then it's like, let me really assess what that means, you know what I mean? And the more I got into the community, the more I learned that there was in Athens, UGA, and then there was the Athens community that dealt with its own issues. And I've always been the person that if I come in, I want to come not taking, but come in and give. So my thing was I began to intern and do different work with Davis Elementary at the schools, where I would develop programs and I would try to find ways to get the student more engaged with the community and the community more engaged with the students. And we formed Dreaded Minds, which was an organization that was to tie the community with the school, to bring those people, the community and the school youth together so we can learn from each other, so we can embrace each other, so we can, you know what I mean, engage each other in a positive way. So it was a student and a community organization that was formed. We would do programs with Davis where I would take the students from the elementary school, and we was doing a whole bunch of different poetry on campus. So we would get the students to come on campus, and you know, they would bust the students on campus, and the students would engage in the poetry, like poetry in motion, where the kids would get a chance to act out some of the poetry, and it was a way of engaging the community with the school. So when I saw that, okay, we can do things to really better this relationship between the school and the community, and I try to do whatever I can to do it. But yeah, you learn quickly, like, why, and you can understand why. You know, you can understand. The community is like, look, like, you know, you can see, like, UGA is just getting bigger and bigger, and we being pushed further and further out. You know what I mean? No jobs. All the jobs the students get, they're not trying to pay us nothing. Low wages. I'm working at UGA, but I'm also working this job and that job, working 3 jobs so that I can pay rent. And when you begin to hear and see some of that stuff, then it's like it does something to you. It's like, whoa, you know, and as you know, the altruist in you, the activist in you, the person inside of you want to say, okay, what can be done? Okay, problem, solution. How can we find a way to resolve it? And then you learn that sometimes the issue is bigger than you. It's so much bigger, and it's generational. It's cycles, you know what I mean? And how can you break the mistrust? You know, we saw what happened on campus when they try to integrate UGA, and so a lot of the communities remember that. Like, nobody forget that. They know what happened. So whereas like now it's a makeover, everybody's smiling. It's like, okay, what's rooted behind that smile? And so there are issues at the community. There's a mistrust, and there's a reason. It's not like they're making stuff up. There's a reason for that mistrust. So it was about, how do we break that? How do we form that? And a lot of things that I do was about, how can I get a person to not focus on another person, but to focus on try to rebuild from within, if that makes sense.
Just to clarify, what community or communities are you talking about as being separate or isolated from the campus? What are you?
When I began on campus, it was more like going up North Avenue, because a lot of work we was doing, and we got an idea like, well, okay, a lot of changes are going to be made at the University of Georgia. So a lot of like the Martin Luther King, that Ruth, all the areas around campus, you know, those were the areas that we were going door to door and trying to petition and get the community together to say, okay, what are some of the issues? What are some of the needs? Let's identify what are some of the things. And you realize that simple stuff like, man, we don't got sidewalks. We don't have, so you couldn't just address one problem because there were plenty of problems. So And it was warning, like we was telling the community, like, yo, it's a lot of things. We connected with the different churches, and these were like the Fourth Street, the whole North Avenue area around the campus.
Primarily black communities.
Of course, African American communities, of course, and back then it was more, because and sadly, one thing that don't lie is time, and a lot of those houses that we knocked on are now student houses. A lot of those areas have been broken down and rebuilt, and homes gentrification. So
And this was in the early 2000s?
this was, yeah, I came here in 99. I came to UGA in 99. And we began doing a lot of the social work stuff within 2000, and it was some merit to it because a lot of those homes and a lot of those African American families, older, were saying, man, look, they trying to take my house and they trying to this and this, and sometimes you're like, okay, come on, like, say, look, let's focus on this and this and this, but time don't lie. 10 years later, it's like, whoa, 15 years later, well, you was on to something, because that whole area is gentrified. There's nothing but students there now. And we were, back then, trying to warn the community, let's work together to figure out how we can address and work together with UGA, and that's what the community is saying. UGA is not about working with us. It's about taking what we have. And it's about how do we repair that? How do we repair that relationship, Because people would say, well, them areas were nothing but crime, a lot of crime there anyway, so we just came there and broke down and got rid of all the people and built new houses, and now, we got students living there. And when the students come, that's when money all of a sudden is found, and money is now invested in the community. So that's the issue that the town has with UGA, and it's a real issue, and it's not, you can't just say it's happening in Athens. It's happening in New York, it's happening in Chicago, it's happening in DC, it's happening in every place I go and do shows, you see it happening. And that's the sad reality, but the sad truth. So that mistrust, that trust and mistrust, and this is why when students come out, it causes that, like, no, you're a UGA, I don't want to have anything to do with UGA. But yet you have the other aspect of saying, hey, I want to just get a job at UGA because UGA at least pay. But then, do they really pay? So, yeah.
Could you talk a little more about Dreaded Minds and what that was about, what your goals were? It sounds like it was related to that. It was very much related to that divide. It was also about hip hop in Athens, right?
Yes,
so
yes.
Could you talk a little bit about?
Now, the founder of Dreaded Minds was a brother by the name of Montu Miller, and it's crazy. When I was at Gordon College, I had a girlfriend who went to Georgia State, so I would come to Atlanta and see. I was gonna say girl. I had a friend who was at Georgia State, and I would come to Atlanta and see her. And one day I came to Atlanta, and she was roommates or best friend with another lady, and Montu was dating her. So we met each other in Atlanta. This was probably in '97. Before I even came to UGA, I didn't even know if I was coming to UGA. And he was just talking about all the things that he's doing. He was like, man, Dreaded Minds. He was like, man, I got an idea for an organization called Dreaded Minds. We're going to put together that's this and this. And I was like, and I was telling him some of the things that we were doing down in Gordon. Like, man, we get in the community, we trying to do this and this and this. So it's kind of like brothers just kind of passing and saying, yo, this is what I'm doing, this is what I'm doing. Yo, good luck, have a good one. I see you when I see you. And when I got to UGA, because I didn't think he went to UGA, and we ended up at UGA. And I'm walking, and he called my name. I'm like, oh, and we embraced each other, and he was like, we on campus. Remember Dreaded Minds? Like, let's make it happen. He already had the bylaws, and I said, let's do it. And the concept was to create a home outside of home within the UGA. Because a lot of times University of Georgia, and as a lot of African American students, we didn't really feel included in a lot of, it would say, oh, come to UGA. But we didn't really feel included in a lot of the programs. We didn't really feel a connection. So we would form what was called man, what we called it? It's on the tip of my tongue. Um, it was like an open mic, but it was at his home. So it started off maybe 12, 15 students, and we would just have an incense and we would just kind of talk. And the idea was the lounge. That's what it is, the lounge. And we would just walk through these bees, and the idea was whatever issues you got, leave it outside of the bees. When you come here, let's just talk, let's share, let's open, let's engage. And we would just pass the incense, and whoever had the incense, it was their time to speak. And we would just kind of talk about life, man. This is what happened this year on campus, man. I managed to this, and we would just kind of share experience, and it was a way of creating a community within a community. And that lounge became 20, then 30, then 60. It was like, whoa, it's too big. So from there, we moved into a location. So what we decided to do was to break Dreaded Minds into, not break, but to have different committees within Dreaded Minds. So we started off as a student organization, but we opened it up to the community as well, because it was a way of showing a lot of those young brothers in the community, giving them access and giving them opportunities to come on campus and learn and see, so that way it can inspire them. And at the same time, those brothers in the communities, or those people in the communities, will allow us the opportunity to come out and embrace us. Like, we're coming into your town. Like, let me learn about it. Let me understand where I'm walking. Let me understand what areas I should, or should not go to. So we began that, and one of the focus of Dreaded Minds was the hip hop element, because Athens was always known for its rock town. Athens is a rock town. Anybody say Athens, REM, it's a rock town. So hip hop was not really embraced in Athens. Like, people would shun hip hop. Like, nobody want to play that music. So not a lot of clubs, not a lot of people would entertain hip hop in a lot of ways. So Dreaded Minds, there was already hip hop in Athens. So we're not going to say we brought hip hop into Athens, because there was already hip hop in Athens, a lot more underground. So I think was like, let's figure out a way to utilize our student, identities to get, or at least open up. So we started with open mics. We started with poetry nights, where we do different poetry, and we would do different hip hop, and that was a way of really bringing more of the community as well as the town inside. And Dreaded Minds wasn't only black. It was like, we had white kids, we had women. It was open to everyone. And the concept was just like, let your mind dread. Like, one strand of hair can easily be pulled apart, where when it's a lock, when it's a dread, it gets hard to pull it. So it was about, let's form that lock, let's form that unity, and not allow anything to pull us apart. And we would do different things, like we would go have ciphers on campus, like big ciphers. At that point, hip hop and ciphers were really big globally. Like, everybody was into ciphers, and we put like hip hop battles on campus, and we really brought a lot of attention. I mean, we would bring in hundreds and hundreds of people. We were like, wow. So we would also take kids to we went to Clemson, and we would meet over there with hip hop artists there, and we would have battles on Clemson, and guys would come with UGA flags, and it was but it was all fun. It was an embrace fun, and people would probably never know that kind of stuff was happening in Athens, in UGA. Because it was like, even within campus, many worlds within the worlds on campus. So what we did was, we had the Dreaded Minds, where we focused on the hip hop, and then I was solely in charge of the community aspect. We developed an organization called BEARS, Bringing Education Above Regular Standards. And it was called Dreaded Mind Seeds, where we would go into the high schools, and the concept was to use our expression as a way to get kids to open up, to bring out, to pour out the anger, and to talk about different things. And so I was involved with the community aspect, and it fit, because social work, I was always in the community, so I was in charge of there. Then we had a finance committee, and we had a nice little organization, and we kind of had to, one thing about Athens is a transient town, so people come and go. So a lot of people came, a lot of people enjoyed it, and then a lot of people left. But they took with them that idea. So we all still in touch now. We got some people up in Africa. We got people all over, but they always like, hey, what's going on with Joy the Minds? Where's the Joy the Minds family? And so it was always a positive thing. And we did a lot of different things to really bring the community on campus and find a way to get the campus out to the community and really begin that dialogue,
In addition to people moving, coming for school and then moving on, there was also some misunderstanding in the larger UGA or Athens community about what y'all were doing.
Yeah, like anything, whenever people come together, especially when, the program is, when you see a bunch of black kids together, oh, they must be up to no good. But whenever people come together, people begin to label it as a gang. It's a gang, or it's a criminal organization. So you began to see a lot of that, in the sense where, somebody would get arrested and he would have a Dreaded Mind shirt on, and it's like, oh boy, that don't help. So we felt that it was important to, rather than allowing something that you build to change, because people would start thinking it was a gang, like, yo man, I want to be part of Dreaded Minds, the gang, and it's like, nah, it's not it's an organization that's about bringing, and we will make sure that you need to come, every member need to engage with community service, and we go talk to churches, to schools, but some people just understood the hip hop element of it, and other people just so at that point, because even at some points I had to leave Athens and go and do my travel, so I would always come back and check in, but the call was, let's just kind of, bring this thing down, let's just kind of, squash it, or bring the Dreaded Minds bring it to, I'm not gonna say bring it to a closure, but let's just kind of deactivate whatever it is that we're doing, because you don't want it to take on the wrong name, because it would just take one ignorance and one person to fight somebody, and he got this t-shirt on, and before we know it, another gang say, oh man, us versus y'all. And we don't have time for that type of ignorance. So it was about, let's just kind of deactivate it for now, but we just continue to do what we do, because Montu still do a lot of hip hop in Athens. I still do a lot of community service and the chess things, and so we still do what we do, but we just kind of had to, sometimes you have to kill what you create before what you create kills you, if that makes sense. So that was kind of like, I guess, the philosophy behind that.
Let me pause right there.
What made you decide to study social work?
The saying goes, did I decide to study it, or did it decide to study me? But it was a part of me. When I first got into school, my thing was, okay, I got to prepare for the world. Where is everything? Everything's going to computers. So I think when I initially went to college, I got into it for computer science, and then I was like, I programming, I was like, I don't know but I've always been a people's person. People have always expressed that they feel so comfortable talking with me, and so I decided, I said, you know what, I got into learning psychology and sociology, and then I was say, you know what, social work, and let me get into the social work. But social workers tend to have a very negative, connotation around it. People think a social worker, you want to take my kids, and it's like, nah, that's not what it's about. It's social work, I'm here to, work with you socially, if that makes sense. But being a social worker was kind of like I knew it would give me the opportunity to do what I want to do, because social work is wide open. You can go with the elders, you can go with the youth, you can go in with the homeless, or you can go into any direction, and you can pretty much create what you want to create, because it's all about, as my father used to say, providing solutions to a problem. You know what I mean? So social work, I said, you know what, this would be that one field that I am not going to be a robot in somebody's cubicle, and you know, how that wasn't me. That's not me. I'm a people's person. I like to move. I like to engage. I like to walk. I like to talk. I like to, you know what I mean, shake hands, and you know, so that's, and I felt social work gave me the platform where I can create what I want to create, and I can incorporate new ideas and new concepts into that practice and inspire and challenge and change. So social work kind of was the best avenue to go and do what I need to do.
And you finished your master's from UGA in what year?
I think it was 2003. I got my master's at social work with social work at University of Georgia. And I had some great professors too, you know, real good professors. Like, they really challenge you, you know, they really, you know, a lot of times, you know, on campus, I would go into other classes and it's like, I'm sitting in a room with 300-400 other students and I'm in the back and, you know, I'm just in my own world. And whereas I would enjoy the social work because it was like the teachers engage you and challenge you. Like, I'm gonna bring out your perspective. Like, let's go there. Let's challenge your perspective. And it's good because a lot of people have never got a chance to really question their own perspective or to really, you know what I mean, get an idea of who they really are. And I think that social work program really kind of, whatever was inside of me, it pulled it out to the surface. Like, okay, what, and challenged me in certain areas. And I was like, man, I'm gonna try this. I'm gonna implement this. And that's how it happened.
And you started mainly working with kids after that, right?
I actually, in the beginning, my intern, I interned at a jail. It was in Jackson County. Was it in Jackson? Yeah, Jackson County. And so it was kind of like, I'm out there with, you know, guys who were doing time. And around the time, I remember it was 9/11. And so the country was going through, you know, what it was going through. You know, the country was in a very hostile and grieving state. And it was an interesting space the country was in. And at the time I was interning at this I.W. Davis. It was this the jail down in Jackson. And I remember we used to do like art therapy there because I was always about trying to encourage a lot of the guys in there to, like, even though you're inside, you still have obligation. You can still have an impact with a lot of the young people out there because they're being programmed to want to go there, to want to run to jails, you know. So you have an opportunity to still have an impact. And I remember at that point, I was like, I can maybe teach the people about Arabic. Somebody want to learn Arabic, I can teach them about Arabic. And so I remember trying to understand what was going on in the country and try to develop something within that jail. So I started off with the adult, and then I transferred into interning as a probation officer with the Department of Juvenile Justice. And then from there, I just began to do a lot more wraparound services, a lot of work, just dealing with families. I felt it was important to try to stop a youth before he reaches that state, rather than run to somebody who's already doing time and says, hey, man, this is what you can do again, you know, this is what you can try to do different next time. And really, you know, day to day, I'm not even thinking about what you're saying, bro. You know, so working with youth was a way of, like, you know, I can have a stronger impact, and I can find a way to influence them a lot before they end up incarcerated.
What were you noticing about young people who ended up in the juvenile system here, and how did it compare to what you were seeing growing up in Brooklyn?
I always tell people that it's the same program. Like, I mean, I'm big. Everybody's like, man, what you talk about with this program and stuff? It's the same program. Like, we all are watching the same television. We all listen to the same music. Not we all. I mean, some listen to rock, rap, you know, but the majority of people, we're watching the same tube, and the same things are programming us. So you would see a kid walking with his pants, halfway down in Atlanta or in Athens, and you see the same thing, Connecticut. You see the same thing going to Louisiana. Why? Because we all are affected by the same programming, by the same program. So growing up in New York, it was a little different because I can literally wake up and say, today I want to go to, I could just throw something on throw a dart on a map and say, whatever country that is, I want to see if there's a food like that in New York. And that can become your adventure. And you can just go your day in New York looking for food or taste that food, and you can just get lost in New York. Jump on a train and get lost somewhere in the city, in the Bronx, in Manhattan. Whereas down in Georgia, I saw that a lot of the problems that these kids were dealing with was a lack of exposure. A lot of times, and I can understand the mentality because there were people in Brooklyn that never left Brooklyn. You know what I'm saying? So I can understand the mentality where the same mentality exists here, where there were kids who have never left the town. So all they knew were what they saw. And when a child don't have anything, then you'll be willing to clinch onto anything. Well, I'm east side, I'm west side. You'll be willing to take ownership of locations that you don't own. You'll be willing to die for something that don't belong to you, or that who's the landlord that own the property? And you talk about you, so it was a way of, you saw that, but I understood the mindset. I understood it clearly, so it was like, wow. And then mesh that with, poverty, the high poverty, and, with all the other, cycles and generation cycles and cycles of issues that just, so it was like I understood what I was dealing with. So when I began to work with the kids, it was kind of like easy because I identified. And I remember, like at one point I was like, I'm gonna write my autobiography. I'm gonna write the story of my story. Before somebody else tell your story, you tell your own story. And I remember opening the book with the kid, like one of the first kid, and it's like, I remember just breaking the ideas of how I saw myself in this kid, And I saw a younger me. And when I first met him, I read on paper, and it was kind of painting him as he's a monster, he's this and this. When I, met the kid, it was like, what's up, man? And it was automatically connection. And the first rule of, you got to connect with what you're dealing with your population. You got to know a little bit about them. You got to know a little bit about the background, the history, what's going on before you can try to save the world. You got to understand the world. So it was more of an idea where I looked at it from the way of, every kid I see, I'm just going to try to expand their mindset, to try to expand how they see things, introduce them to a different kind of music, introduce them to different way of thinking, introduce them to something different. That way they can begin to know that, okay, there are other, get you out your perspective, get you out your box. There are other things. So think outside of the box. There are other things you can do in the world. So I saw that, when I began working with kids, and that's what made it easy for me to really connect with a lot of the kids. A lot of juvenile judges be like, man, what are you doing? Or what are you doing to these kids? Because these kids are really changing. And it's like, I'm just being real. I'm just engaging them. I'm not doing nothing special. I'm just really meeting them where they're at, and I'm trying to expand the way they see it.
Was it at that point that you started using chess?
Yes. I would start using chess a little bit just as a way to say, okay, let me introduce you to this game, because it's like, man, how can I get this kid to love chess? He sees chess as a nerd, like, man, that's for the nerds, man. How can I get them to love it? So I began to introduce chess, and I began to show how much chess mirrors life. The same upbringing, the same programming I grew up in with the elders would share with me. Look, chess is life. You got to think before you move. You got to figure out what you want to do. You got to figure out how you want to do it, So I began to employ a lot of that same tactic where in teaching kids chess, and before I know it, it's like, you would teach one kid, and now every time I tell a kid, after you learn, you gotta teach somebody else, because it was always like a passive way, passive forward. Now you gotta teach somebody else. Now you gotta teach somebody else. So one kid became 3, and 3 became 4, and I remember reaching out to what was it? It was REM Burtis Downs with REM. I remember reaching out when I first took the kids to DC for a chess tournament. And at the time, I didn't have no nonprofit. I didn't have none of that. He saw what I was doing. He was like, yo, he gave me some resources to take the kids up to DC and taking those kids from Nellie B area. Nellie B is like the housing complex in the Athens community. And I took them up to DC, and it was kind of like, wow, it was changing there, like, wow, like, yo, like, wow, like it would. And I remember that because I remember being a child, like, wow, look at that, look at this. I remember, so it's just about expanding the perspective, and I just use chess as the vehicle to do that. It was like to put them on the chessboard, you know what I'm saying? And then say, this is you. What are you going to do? How are you going to do it? Why do you want to do it? When are you going to do it? What are you trying to do with that? You know what I mean? And just all the 6 W's, you know what I mean? And that's how it just kind of flourished into, the chessing community.
What has been your experience of how kids react when you break out a chessboard, whether one-on-one or in a public space? Because you go a lot of places, that where there's not usually chess, and you bring it there. So what has been your experience of how people react?
How people react, it's and that was actually one of the reasons why I introduced kids to chess, because people usually associate chess players with intellectuals or, great thinkers and great minds. So if you've been programmed to see these kids as thugs, but then then you see this thug playing chess, it's kind of like your programming is kind of at war with itself. You know what I'm saying? So it becomes a thing. People's like, man, you play chess? It's like, what, you can't play chess? Like, yeah, we play chess. So it was always good because it would give that kid confidence. You know what I mean? When he see people come and be like, man, wow, you play chess, like, man, you must be very intelligent. And, and the kid be like, yeah, man, yeah, I'm intelligent. Yeah, I'm good, So wherever I would go with chess, it was always like people would really enjoy it. Sometimes people just sit down and engage. And it's a very social game. Chess is very social. Even though when you play chess, people, encourage you to be silent and everything is going on internally or mentally. You know what I mean? But it's social in a sense where it draws people close. As you play, those who understand the rules just come and watch. Even if you don't understand the rules, people just come and watch. And you just see people engage. And then I'd get a chance to talk to people. And I'd be like, hey, yo, meet you, what's your name? And let the kid introduce himself and, get the kid to be more sociable, to open up, to express. And so when I would take chess into these different places, it was always like, people were always like, wow, you know what I mean? Especially when they see a bunch of young African-American boys playing chess, it's like, wow, like this is a good thing you're doing. So what am I doing? I'm just playing chess. Well, it's a good thing though, it's a good thing. So I thought that would be one of the strongest vehicles. And when we started saying, okay, it started with the chess and pizza. We was just like, we're gonna eat pizzas, we're gonna get some pizza, we're gonna play some chess, and we just gonna talk mess to each other, and I'm gonna teach you a couple of things, and I'm gonna learn some things from you. Because as I'm playing chess, believe it or not, it's not the chess, it's the dialogue. Like we're doing a lot of talking about life and how you see this, how you understand that. Like, yeah, like, wow. And kids just get a chance to talk. So kids be like, yo, life, I'm stressed, man. Let's just play chess. And we just play and we just talk. You know what I mean? So it was a way of just kind of getting them to open. And through the chessboard, I was able to see some kids would just react. It was like, I could bet you get into a lot of trouble, right? When you start stuff and you don't finish it, right? How do you know? Just by look. This is what you did. Look, you started this, but then you somehow lost your focus and you went somewhere else. So kids were able to see, like, man, yeah, I need to change. And I would show them, try this, try that, using chess. So that's why chess was chosen as the tool.
So how did you and I guess a couple other folks start the Chess and Community Conference organization?
Man, I would say, and me and my wife, we joke about that all the time because I can remember we were sitting at a Greyhound. And it's crazy, it's like how the ideas come to you, right? We just sitting at the Greyhound, and I was just looking, I was like, baby, I see it so clearly. She was like, oh boy, here you go again with that, you know, because I'm one of those philosophical thinkers. She's like, baby, I see so clearly, like, what if we develop an organization where we do this, and I just laid out the whole concept for the conference. And the idea behind the conference was, what if we place the issues that we see that is going on in a town, in a city, in a county, in a country, on a continent, what if we place those questions, real questions, and we ask the kids to come up with solutions for it, you know? So that was one of the ideas behind the community. It was like to really focus on an issue that, and every town, it has its own unique, you know, problems. So if we allow the kids to identify, research, explore the issues, and then we give them a stage to present, that would be pretty cool, right? You know? And then they will be speaking, this is me talking to my wife, they will be talking to a whole bunch of young chess players, strategists, and future minds, and this and this. So if we can merge the philosopher in the room with the chess player and this, then how can we not have a strong world? This is me, and she's looking like, oh boy, here you go again with that crazy. But that was the concept. So the idea then was saying, okay, it's a good idea, but okay, how are you going to fund it? You know, that's come down to, how are you going to fund that? Where are you going to get the space from? Who's going to pay for it? How are you going to raise the money to get these kids scholarships? How are you going to do all that? So it was like, let's figure out a way to get the community to, like, this is a community event. Like, let the communities, if the community talk about what they want to see, the business community, the actual community, the churches, if we all have the same mission of inspiring kids, developing leadership, and let's let the community chip into, you know, and my concept was, if I can get 100 businesses to give me $100 or $50, then I can begin. And so I would always come up with different ideas, just using chess as if I can, and it was the support of like Grady Thrasher, just different philanthropists in Athens that really believe in wanting to see Athens go further, wanting to see Athens grow. Understand that Athens just don't belong to one group of people, that it belongs to everyone. People that want to see change, that want to see positive change. And I've come to the realization that there's more people in the world who want to see this thing get better. You know what I mean? It may be a few that benefits off of the mess, the chaos, because it's all a hustle. It's all about money. Racism is money. Everything's money. So, but there are those who want to see this thing better. You know what I mean? And I was able to tap into it, and they supported the whole process. Said, man, we love the idea. We would, because I don't have the money to, you know, I can't afford a 501c. You know, I'm a social worker. You know what I mean? We don't make no money, you know? So it was a lot of people that saw the passion and was like, yo, look, whatever you need, let me support you in this process. And from there, we developed the conference, the Chess and Community Conference. And that was the idea behind allowing the community, where we pitched out to all the business community that this is how you can support, you know, this is how you can support. If we can get super PACs to bring together billions of dollars to influence one person, then surely we can get local businesses to come together to influence a community of people. So the idea was, introduce different levels to the business and have them just kind of, support. And we allow, like any conference, we show the community, these are the businesses that supported this process. And to date, we're able to give 16 scholarships away. And all the money has been kind of locally, from the ground, a grassroots approach, and with different philanthropists and different people who believe in the vision of what we're doing, and then continue with the process. So we started with, of course, that 1 hour a month concept. Like, there's over 720 hours in a month. And I used to always say, if as a community we can't come together for 1 hour a month, then we deserve everything that happens to us. If as a country, as a city, as a county, we can't come together and really begin to discuss real solutions, then we're going to continue to go through the issues that we go through. So using that 1 hour a month, I applied it to myself and began with the chess, teaching kids chess. And 1 became 3, and 3 became 4, and 4 became 8, 8 became 10, and now we're up to like 80, almost anywhere between 50 and 80 kids coming to Chess and Pizza once a month. And then it came into, can we do it weekly at the library? So we got anywhere from 20 to 40, 50 kids coming at the library every Monday. And I didn't, because at first I'm like, okay, with the video games, these kids are really not into chess, man, But you learn that, like, more and more kids, like, are really engaged. They love the game. And more than just the game, I think the social interaction, where a lot of these kids, everybody's being drawn into computers and into me, my world, my identity, hide, where now there's a platform where you can, like, you can go on a basketball court and you can play ball and just talk and form, where it says you can come together and they form relationships and they talk and they look forward to coming together, and these kids and all different races. And that's what Athens is supposed to look like, That's what we say we want. So we just began to put that in practice, and one thing led to another. Then we, chess and climbing, and we take the kids to Stone Mountain, and they get the perspective, change the perspective. Like, so that's what the documentary Life to Griot was about, was to really change their perspective, show people that this is what 1 hour a month, this is what me just taking a couple of kids on the chessboard, this is what it eventually grown into. Imagine the things that you can do. Like, we all have power to influence, to change, to make some things happen. So that's what chess and community developing. And another, Big Dog on the River, my friend Stevens, he said, man, he saw the documentary, he was like, I love what you're doing with the kids. I would love to get these kids on the river. So we developed chess and kayaking. The kids get a chance to go kayaking on the river, and then afterwards, we take over the lounge and we have chessboards set up, and it's an opportunity to get parents. Because we tell parents, come on, join your kids. So the parents are out there kayaking with the kids, and parents get a chance to engage. And so it's just about really kind of bringing the community together with chess. Yeah.
So when you've talked about structures and you've talked about sort of on the ground work, just relationship-based sort of work, and I'm wondering what you see as being the relationship between the two, or how does, building this community ultimately change some of the structures that you're talking about?
The structures that we see in town, because what
you've mentioned the prison system in particular as one of them, and so I'm
it's more of awareness. The saying goes that you can hide something from somebody in plain sight, and here we are. We have access to endless information. Google, you can just Google, but yet a lot of people don't like to read. So. Like, you have access to it, but then you don't like to read it, so hiding something in plain sight. The idea was to take some of the things that I saw that was happening in Athens, and I'm sure there's a reason. Like, and I talked to the chief, the reason why Athens is bringing, expanding their prisons, because, Athens have to send, there's inmates to other states, other jails in other counties and money. And so they decided, hey, let's build one here. So I understand some of the reasons for it, but it was a way of, does the community understand what's going on? Does the community know that a $77 million jail is being built? So it was a way of taking the issues that you see that are happening and allowing the youth to voice that. So by having that discussion, like with the first conference we did, we asked the question, what would you do with $77 million if you had it? How would you use it to better your community? And kids would give ideas about, like, I would build a train station from Athens to Atlanta, and whoever ride it, we take that money, put it back in the community. Kids were coming up with, I would build a therapeutic program rather than a jail. Then the therapeutic program will focus on this and this. So kids were coming up with solutions for what they would do because they had families who were directly impacted by the prison, the expansion of the jail, by the prison complex. So awareness. I think once the community is aware, then the community would know how to respond. Because if you're not aware that something is happening, because I'm dealing with other issues. There's so many issues that it's like, where do I point it to? I'm dealing with so many issues. So when the community became aware, then it was like, okay, now how do we influence this? How do we change this? How do we, and a lot of times it's like, well, the decision was already made. The SPLOS was written, 10 years ago. Like, you're getting the kids to talk about a mute issue because it was already in the books, but it was that awareness. So that way, in the next SPLOS meeting, maybe we have a better turnout. Maybe we get more ears really on the ground. Maybe we get more people to get a better idea of, okay, what can I do? Why don't we do this with the money? Why don't we do this? So I believe once the mass is educated on an issue, you would hope and they make the right decision. So the idea was to really put it in the mind frame and the psychology of kids, because if we get the young people to begin to think about it, to internalize it, to talk to their friends about it, to talk to their families about it, when they write in the papers, they research it. They get the teachers, they get different people. That would begin the dialogue. So, and the prison was just one example, but it was a way of showing the community that Athens belongs to everyone. The mayor, the commissioners, they work for you. They work for you. So you are their employer, They are your employees. So put them to work. Let them know what you think. Let them know, but come up with ideas, not just problems, but solutions. So the conference and what we're doing with chess is about developing the next generation of kids to start thinking more critically, like, okay, what can be done to address this issue? If we have a growing gang violence or a gang initiative in Athens, how do we tackle that? But put that in the hands of the youth. How do we address the poverty in Athens? That was the topic for this year. How do we address poverty? And have kids come up with solutions and think about it, so that way they can understand how to break it. And each year add in different elements. Like this year we added a entrepreneurship element to it, where these kids will come up, middle school students were coming up with ideas for what businesses they would create, and then another real ledge, they helped to sponsor the seed money to develop those businesses. So it was a way of bringing more nonprofits on board to say, we have all these nonprofits in Athens, why is it one of the poorest counties? You know what I'm saying? We have all these nonprofits, all these resources. We have a resource of 35,000 students. Why in the world are we having issues here? You know what I mean? So, but it's deeper. I mean, it's real issues. It's real deep issues. But poverty being the root of a lot of it. So it was a way, the chess thing was a way of really bringing the community, bringing a level of awareness, and developing the next generation of kids to start thinking about strategic solutions for problems. Not just problems, but solutions. How do we address those problems?
And what year was the first conference?
The first conference was in 2012. Yeah, that's when our organization, our nonprofit, was founded. Now, I've been doing what I've been doing for a long time with the kids, but with a nonprofit, because you was like, man, well, we have all these nonprofits, why do we need another one? You know, it's hard. You can't really get the resources you need, and a lot of times it was coming out of the poor social worker's pocket. You know, he's like, I can't feed. Look, all right, we all get one slice, man, or half a slice. Let's break that in half, because you can't afford all of it. So giving it up there to the community says, well, you know, we got some people in Athens making some serious bread, some serious money. So let's just kind of spread the love a little bit, you know what I mean? So let me see if we can get the community to support this initiative. And now when we do the chess and pizzas, we have about 80 kids. Parents just come. Sometimes parents be like, yo, here's 20, and we get that, we get all the pizzas, you know what I mean? And the community builds the community, you know what I mean? It's not a top-down structure, but it's more of a bottom-up, where you tell the people on the bottom, you have the power to control what is going on top. Don't make somebody flip this pyramid upside down. Because when the bottom learn to move together, it collapses. You know what I mean? So rather than allowing things to collapse, let's work together. There should be it should be nowhere in the world that 88 people can control, own more than half of the resources, the wealth on the planet. Like, are you kidding me? Like, you know, but it is a reality. Like, put me in that shoe. Let me be one of the 80, part of that 1% that can own. And I would think that I can really resolve a lot of things. But maybe that's part of the overall agenda, to keep things where they are, to keep the prisons flourishing, to keep this people poor and this. So there's no, like, people need jobs. So when you step back and really kind of look at things for what it is, it's not a pretty picture, you know, because it's like, it's business as usual, you know. And my thing is, at least, I don't want to adopt that pessimistic. I don't want to adopt that hopeless, like, oh man, it's, you know, hopeless mentality. So it's like, let me play my part, let me play my position, let me do what I can to change this thing.
You talked about looking at things sort of as they really are and awareness, and I'm wondering if people understand the reality of why kids from around here are getting put in prison or getting arrested and put in jail for a time. And I'm wondering if you could speak at all to just what you've seen, you know, as far as trends, what sorts of things are actually happening as opposed to what people might think is happening?
It's layers upon layers of it. I mean, the juvenile system has kind of restructured itself in a way where it's now beginning to just kind of separate the severity of crime. For instance, a kid could have a runaway, and things escalate to the point where the runaway is in jail. In a YDC, like, you are in a YDC for running away. Like, how many times I ran, you know what I'm saying? Like, how many times, you know, where you're next to a kid that really did some robbery. And so the juvenile system now is changing a lot of its codes in a way where let's start to really address some of the severe issues with severe consequences, and some of the less severe, let's put things in perspective. So when you see the issues in Athens, I mean, these kids, when you have the poverty that we have in Athens, and sometimes you don't see it. And that's the thing, it's like, when you come to the town, you don't see it. It's like, wow, UGA. You have kids all over Georgia that can't wait to get to Georgia, to UGA, to Athens. Whereas you got kids in Athens that can't wait to leave. That's, I can't, you know, the first minute I get, I'm out, I'm gone. So a lot of the issues, I mean, it's a lot of burglary. Why do we have burglary? Burglary is a thing of somebody wants something. They get the stuff, they find a way to sell it, get money. You know what I mean? For whatever reasons. You know, so there are levels of the crime with what you see in Athens, and and then, you have, a lot of police officers that I've got a chance to really meet a lot of police officers and really talk with them and understand. I even befriend a lot of police officers locally, and you can understand, like, to see things from their perspective on how they see it. So there's no one answer for what you're saying. I'm saying it's like they get incarcerated for so many different things, but what you do see is cycles. It's cycles of, the gang initiative is growing because a lot of kids. What happens, and like in one of the poems you and me talk about when the father is incarcerated, we have a foster care crisis in the state of Georgia and throughout the world. We need more foster parents. What happens to the parents? You know what I mean? Why are there so many men incarcerated? Like, your kid went to jail for having weed, but now the states are talking about legalizing it. Like, okay, so what happened to all those people that did all that time for marijuana? But now you can legalize it and you can make money off it on the stock market and invest in hemp. And so it's okay. So it's this, when these kids do it, the kid go to jail, get 2 years for selling this, but you can sell this at these different stores all day. So it becomes a thing where we look at policies and it's like, man, this thing is ugly. And it's, when you build it, they will come, you know what I mean? So you build 77, you put money into a jail, guess what? You will fill it up. And only in another 10 years to say, hey, we need to build a bigger one. Because there are different approaches. There are different things there are different measures we can take. There are different things, different directions we can run. So a lot of kids find themselves in these situations, and a lot of it is, kids. The same mistakes I made as a child, the same mistakes you probably made as a child. You grew up in a little town, and we grew up, where we make mistakes, we do things, but the programming is in such where when this kid, it is a crime, let's put it on the news, let's give him the mug shot, let's give him the ugly, muggly face, and make everybody fear, be afraid, they're criminals. And it's like, it's that type of programming that it's like, let's find a way to stop that, because there's a lot of good happening in this town that you don't hear about, that you don't see. But the minute you hear one thing, it begins to taint. UGA, don't go into the community. Why? Look, criminals. And it's like, come on. It's a lot of good things happening. And in what we were doing, we was trying to just show that throughout my time in Athens. So, they come in, they go in and out for a lot. And there are real issues in Athens. And the students on campus, as well as the people in position, they can make a lot of, I'm able to do what we're doing with really no resources and bringing the town together. Imagine when you do give us resources and the levels we can take it and expand it internationally and get these kids exposed to different things. But things takes time and things take steps. So, maybe one day I'll tap into that Bill and Melinda Gates money, you know what I mean?
Well, what are some of the organizations that you see? I mean, you mentioned Grady Thrasher, you've obviously talked about chess and community. What are some of the good things going on in Athens and organizations that you've seen doing work that is,
Man, where do you begin? I mean, you got the Rites of Passage, you got Community Connection. That's more of a structure, but it's about really bringing awareness to the communities. You have Destin, which is an organization a lot of people don't know, but high success rate of getting kids together, tutoring, and getting kids to read. And you got Dr. Bailey, got his program on UGA's campus, the Saturday School. You got Athens Tutorial. You got Godly Girls. I mean, there are tons of organizations that are doing different things in the community that don't have resources, that don't have the money. And that's when people see it, they're like, wow, there is always money for jail, but there seems to never be money for our organizations, you know what I mean? So this is why people start to look at it and says, okay, what is the real agenda here? Is the agenda to really assist and help, or the agenda is to incarcerate, put them away, but at some point, that person's gonna have to come back home. You know what I mean? That's the reality. At some point, you can't lock a person away forever. At some point, he or she is going to have to come home. So you can either address the situation here, at this stage, at this age, or you're going to have to face it when it comes back and there are no jobs and I got a criminal record and I can't work. Now, I'm desperate. Now, I had time to think and I had time to join other organizations and learn all kinds of things in there. Now I can really put some damage to this community. So it's good to address it at a young age and figure out a way to resolve and inspire and encourage and motivate. But there are a lot of organizations on the ground. I would do injustice if I just sit here and just name, because somebody be like, oh, you didn't name my organization. So, but there are a lot of organizations in town that are doing a lot of great things. Peer Court, I love that program where kids get a chance to inspire each other. Kids become the judge, the jury, and they influence other kids. My boy John Nash got a organization where, like a non-violent, where the kids, they resolve their issues, finding ways to resolve conflict resolutions, you know. So there's a lot of different people doing a lot of different things. It's just I think one of the issues, how do you get the community to buy into a lot of it? Because this is community that sees itself as UGA's experiment. So how do you get them to buy into something? You know what I mean? Oh, UGA just want to use the data and we collect data on homeless and this and that and we get grants and we still have a homeless issue. We still have, you know what I mean? Oh, the data that you collect is used against me 20 years later. You know, so it's like, oh boy, you know, how do you work? So a lot of people are at a point where, especially I think it becomes not just in this community, but the African community, African American community as a whole don't really trust a lot of, you know, the government in a lot of ways, because it's like you've always experimented, Tuskegee and, you know, syphilis, and you've always, you know, it's always, and then it's just, oh, we're sorry, and then all the data that was collected is now being used to how to manipulate, and now let's music and and how we can use music to manipulate and sell information, and it just becomes like, you know, and that what you see is going on a broad level is going on in Athens, and a lot of how do we get the community to buy into something that can really help, you know what I mean, in a lot of ways. When they look at it like, it's not help, it's an agenda. There's an agenda behind it. What's the agenda? So people don't even trust people no more. Yeah.
So what do you think has to be done to get people to buy in or to build that trust that's been broken?
I think people have to, what we've been trying to do is make people involved. When a person become involved in the situation, when we tell parents to buy into what we're doing, like, let's go to, like, you come be a part of the chess and kayaking. I'm taking the kids to DC, and like I just try to find a way to engage and involve people in a way where they know there is no agenda. Like, I'm not making no money from this. What money I'm making? You know, if anything, I'm giving money that I don't have. So when the community see that, okay, like, this is something sincere, then they begin to, you know, and it's get to know a person one-on-one and not come in with, oh man, I know what you're going through. Oh really? What am I going through? You know? Oh, I know. You really? So what am I dealing with? You know? So getting to know a person and talking to a person, and, you know, that basic human bonding, you know what I mean? Not coming to a premature conclusion of what something is, but being open, engaged, and talk.
What about how long you've been here? I mean,
Yes.
That's the other thing, right? You talked about the transience of the UGA community.
Yeah.
You've been in Athens for 16 years almost.
Yeah, that definitely plays a role, because even at then, I'm still seen as, okay, who are you? And I think just now people start to see, okay, you are about trying to bring something positive here. You're not just doing something because it's a project and then you're going to leave. You know, you are about trying to do something. So, and it takes time. Things takes time to build, and it's a process. You know, how do you break a generation? How do you break something that's ingrained and something that's, you understand. There's a reason why there's a mistrust. And how do you try to say, no, it's not me, I'm not doing that. That's, just do it. I tell them whether you assist or not, I'm gonna do it. It's gonna get done whether 1 or 1,000 people show up. I'm gonna do what needs to be done. And I try to do something minus ego. Take the ego out of, oh, no one showed up, that means I didn't get no money, so that means I'm gonna wait for next year and go out for more grants and funding. I didn't get no money, so I'm gonna wait for next year. No, regardless of what it is, let's just do it because it needs to be done. And if the community see that it needs to be done, they will support it. If not, then it's just be me and a couple of kids playing chess. And guess what? I'm okay with that. You know what I'm saying? I'm okay with that. So you just do the best you can. You do the best you can.
I've got a couple more things, 2 more things I want to ask you. But before I do, is there anything that in particular that you wanted to speak to or that you had?
I'm good.
Okay. So you're a relatively new father.
Yes, fatherhood.
How old is your son?
He's about 15 months now. And yes, if you can see the bags in my eyes, that means I'm still having. Now he's just starting to get to the point where he's trying to sleep through the night. Just like last couple nights, it's been like, okay, he made it. But last night was a rough one. Whenever you got an interview coming up, like he knows. It's like, yes, all night long. No, I got an interview, son. But yeah, I'm a new father.
What are you hoping this community will be for him?
Oh man, it's how can I say it in a way to bring an African American boy into this society that have been programmed to hate boys, to hate, you know what I mean? And I'm not saying it happens, it's the program in place to label those boys. They're cute when they're young, but they reach a certain age, they're monsters, lock them up, throw away the key. I see that it is my duty to try to create the atmosphere that I want to see for my son. So sometimes I bring my son and I'm playing chess and he's sitting there and he's just looking around, and I hope that there is a world that is a lot more, people are not so judgmental, because the direction that it's going, it's like it's ugly. You read the blogs and the replies, and it's like, man, you can see like how so much hate. It's like, wow, where is this coming from, And that was always been a fear of mine, like in the sense of I can deal with it. I'll do it all day because I'll laugh at it or I'll challenge it in whatever way I can. But I think no father, no man, no mother, no parent wants to see their child go through anything, where the person, he gets killed because the other person had an ignorance about him, or the other person has been programmed to believe, he was, so to tell him, look, don't wear no hoodie, walk bare feet. Matter of fact, take your shirt off, have your hand up, crawl on your belly, so that, you don't want to, I'm not going to tell your child to do that, so why? You're not going to tell your child to do that for me. Why should I tell my child to do that? You know what I mean? But I have to teach him to walk as tight and neat as he can so that I don't offend nobody, so nobody could be afraid because of your program, because of their programming. And that's the fear. That's the fear of you want to leave the world better. You want to leave the world better than you received it. So that is a lot of the motivations for why I do what I do with the poetry, why I do what I do for the Athens community, why I try to do what I can in bringing the community together, and hoping that those kids who are 10, who are 7, who are 11 and 13, by the time they become men, by the time they become teenagers and they become men and they're in positions to do policies, they won't see my son from a program perspective. But no, I know his father. You know what I'm saying? His father really was about trying to help. That's not the issue. Like, let's not generalize this entire African American community. Let's not generalize the entire white community. You know what I mean? So what do I want to see is, like, I want to see a better world for my son. You know, I want him, I mean, and it's just not the issues with the race, but even from internally within, like the programming. Like, I want him to watch that television. Like, how do, you know, you can tell a child all day long how beautiful he or she is, but then the child still grow up to believe that she's ugly. And it's like, where do you get that from? It's a programming that's in place. You know what I mean? What is this programming? So it's a lot of subliminal programming that's taking place, and it's like, you want a shelter. You wish you can just, like, no, but you can't. You shelter them, you know, when the storm comes and you move the shelter, they're left helpless. So I do what I can. You got to prepare them. But how do you prepare? How do you prepare your son to deal with a police officer who's been programmed to hate him? And not know that he's programmed to hate him. Or let's say use his mug as a target practice as we see what's going on. You know, it's like, how do you program your son to deal with that? How do you program your black son who's going to be a black man in America? You know, we can say, oh man, get over it. No, it's no racism. The world has changed. We have a black president. Well, let's see what happened when we got the black president. It's like the underbelly came up, the acid came up, and it's just rioting everything around it. And so it's like, how do you teach your son to deal with that there are real issues, that you're going to face racism, you're going to face this thing in life? How do you teach that? You got to teach him to love when another person is teaching his son to hate. Like, so I'm going to love you, and you just going to keep smacking me. I'm just turning cheek after cheek. No. How do you teach that? How do you teach your son that, son, you're going to be a target? The world has been programmed to hate you for whatever reason. The world has been programmed to see you as a criminal, as an animal, as a thug, as a rapist, without even the world has been programmed to see that of you. How do you teach your son to deal with that world? That's not an easy road for no parent. You know what I mean? No parent. It's not easy. So, you know, it's, if the world is programmed to see me as saying I'm not supposed to have feelings. Oh, African American men, they don't take care of their children. No, that's not true. Man, I know a lot of good fathers, man, who, you know, and how do you, like, what's going to turn you into a monster when something happened to that one thing you love, and you're supposed to just take it and let justice do its job? And justice has been programmed as well. So how do you deal with, like, how do you, as a father, how do you deal with that? And it's hard. It's real. It's real conversations that we have. You know, I'm reading books to him, you know, The Alchemist, reading books to him at his young age. He's just looking at me, you know, move through the pages and just trying, how do you prepare him in a real way, in a world that, you know, where the gun sales are just getting more and more. And it's like, how do you really, you know, we see it. We see what's going on. We see the hate. We see the militias. And I'm not saying that militias are all hateful. They have their own issues with the government. And you see the die and we need to just kill, and the police officers saying things. And it's like, how do you train your son to deal with that? How do you train your children to deal with that? You know what I'm saying? So it's not an easy conversation to have, but I encourage other fathers that you change, you provide whatever change you can. This is what I can do for my community. This is what I can do to bring my community together in a way where those kids who may end up being his teacher, you know what I'm saying, can understand this is what his father tried to do for us. His father was about really helping us come together and play chess, whether I'm around or not, whether good Lord decided to take me away or keep me around for a couple more years. You know what I mean? So it's you just do the best you can in shaping the minds of the next generation so that they don't adapt a lot of the bitter or the hatefulness or the ugliness that was passed down. You know what I mean? And you just try to be an example and teach my son to be respectful, be loving, love, but defend yourself. Don't be a coward. Don't just let somebody just, you know what I mean? But don't, because you allow somebody to do that, the hate is turned inward. And if you just allow the anger to project it outward, then you just could, you burn something down. You know what I'm saying? You become aggressive and you angry. He's aggressive, he's angry. So I need to take it inward. And depression, self-destruct. You know what I'm saying? So where's that medium? Where's that balance? And how do we release in good ways? Dude, let's play chess. Let's talk about it. Because we all are walking with the same pain. You know what I mean? So let's talk about it. Let's express it to each other. Let me look. You white, I'm black. Okay. Yeah, I'm going through that too. Now you going? Yeah, I'm going through that. You know what I mean? So we're dealing with the same pain. We have industries and people that profit off of fear sell guns. You know what I mean? Fear devote law. You know what I mean? Fear. And it's just about teaching them to do the best you can. Just do the best you can. I'm gonna do the best I can, and I'm gonna do the best I can to mold the next generation, so that it takes a village to protect. It takes a village to raise. You know what I mean? And hopefully those values that I share with these kids, they can use it in their life lessons and them growing up to be men and women, teachers and doctors and lawyers and judges and policymakers and senators, and they can remember those lessons and they can say, you know what, that's not true. Let's try to look at this in case somebody tried to program them to do something negative. Yeah.
One of the ways that you deal with some of these very difficult questions that often don't have clear answers is through poetry. And so if you have the energy still, we've been talking for a while, but if you have the energy,
Always have
I would
energy.
love to hear, a piece or a part of a piece that you feel like is.
I always have energy for poetry because, like you said, it comes through us, and I think this poem can really reflect what we're talking about now. And the name of the piece is called Georgia. Excuse me. And it says, spread my ashes over the mountains of North Georgia. Bury me deep in Confederate clay. Let my bones purify the soil that were cursed by the trees that unwillingly partook in illegal lynchings. And those trees carved and ashed away in fire worship rituals. Burning crosses display a deep love and devotion for God, yet a deeper hate for God's creation of the darker brothers. Daddy's doctrine still rots the core of the sweet and tender peach, born with love in their hearts, warm spirits baked by the southern sun and cooled by the mist of the savannah breeze. I lost my patience in the concrete jungle of a cold city, but I found her while holding a fishing rod on the Oconee Creek. It was there that the trees made this confession. And then the flapping of an old flag, it broke my meditation. Worn on the skull of an innocent and impressionable cub who stared at me with young eyes but carried old hate. It is your generation who must break your father's curse. It is our generation who must break our father's curse. Climb out of the hate holes they have dug in our hearts so we can once again learn to love whole. Love whole.
Thanks.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much for taking time to talk with us, and thank you for sharing that
Yeah.
at the end.
Yeah, because it's our country, you know what I mean? It's we either gonna work together and secure another planet or secure another 100,000 years for our children, or we just gonna rip each other apart with hate, you know, and turn our planet into a war zone, you know, one of the two. But I believe humanity still have it in them. I believe there's more love in humanity than hate, you know what I mean? And, you know, that's why I do what I do. And if that could be an example for others, let it be. And, you know, just everyone do your part. Just do your part.
Thanks, Life.
Thank you.